Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Episode. Here, we're continuing a series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and you know what time it is? It's time to talk about more Nintendo 64 core updates, because it's been 48 hours since we showed you a video, which means FPGAZumSpass has already updated the core again with some amazing new features and improvements. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top, this core should just be considered the Tony Hawk Pro Skater core, because while it brings a lot of improvements to a lot of games, all three of the Tony Hawk games are now running pretty close to what they should be on original hardware. And I know these are some of the most popular games from back in the day. Everyone played these when they were kids, and I totally get that there's a ton of nostalgia for Tony Hawk Pro Skater. At least the earlier games, I would say the franchise has definitely lost a few steps in the intervening years. But the great thing is, whether you play Tony Hawk 1, 2, or 3, and I'll be showing all three of them in the video, you're going to have an absolute blast doing it. Last time I showed these games, they had a lot of texture issues and there was no text whatsoever. Now pretty much everything that should be on screen is here. The controls are responsive. It is the Tony Hawk Pro Skater you remember from back in the day. And I know you guys always love little personal anecdotes from my life. I have in fact shot with Tony Hawk. I was a sports cinematographer for a very long time, mostly in snow sports and aerial photography for skiing, but out in San Francisco at an event called Ice or Air back in the day I had a shoot, so it's a fun time to see this running on the core because I have a very tiny personal connection to it. But obviously this is just so much fun to watch happen in real time. Every single core update Robert does is there to fix one or two things, and he noted the Tony Hawk Pro Skater franchise in the patch notes, but it actually did improve a lot of other games as well, games that had missing menus or other text issues, because don't forget, in the design of this, what's happening in engine versus what's being put up as a heads-up display would be done in two different ways. So you need to remember, just because the 3D is rendering correctly, the text is handled in a different method, and that's why sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't. Now moving on to other games that have seen a massive improvement as of today's core, Beetle Adventure Racing now has a much smoother intro screen. It used to be that it would black screen in between these little vignettes of the racing, and also the skybox in Coventry Cove was an absolute mess, as were the trees, and you're going to see very shortly we now have the entire sky showing up exactly as it should, and we also have a right color on the vehicle. It used to be that the vehicle was only brown, now we have all the colors, and don't look away at your phone when you're trying to capture, you end up driving right into a fence. But all of the skybox here, all of the trees, everything just looks good, and the skybox has gone through a few different revisions, all of which were definitely bugged in some way or another. And going back to a very early capture of Beetle Adventure Racing, you can see that the trees are just completely not correct. They're coming into the field of view, and the skybox is a smeary mess. From that, it went to being checkerboarded, where you have a bunch of different skyboxes, to what it currently is today. The sky looks exactly like it should, the trees in Coventry Cove look exactly like they should, and my driving skill looks exactly like it should, and I just went straight into that phone booth. But the fun thing is, if you actually hit that, you get a little sound effect that's a little Easter egg in the game. But this, in my opinion, is one of the best racing games on the Nintendo 64, and here on the current core, it is feeling like it is perfect. If there's anything that is not working, I cannot tell whatsoever, and that's always a good sign. I'm sure the eagle-eyed among you might spot something I don't see, because I play like 8 to 10 games every capture session. So if you do see anything you don't like, leave me a note down below, and if you have any requests for future episodes, leave them as well, because there are some viewer requests in this testing video. But just getting Beetle Adventure Racing looking this good is so much fun. It was 100% playable before, but there were some graphical glitches that didn't detract from the fun, but you could tell shouldn't have been on screen. With the current update, that is 100% changed. The trees are where they need to be, the skybox where it needs to be, the frame rate is solid, the controls are exactly as they were on original hardware. It is just a 10 out of 10 in the playability department. And if for some reason you've never played Beetle Adventure Racing, definitely check it out. It's got awesome tracks, it's got awesome shortcuts, it is a super fun time. It's the type of thing you think you're going to play for 10 minutes and you end up losing an hour or two. And the good thing with the current core is now it looks exactly like it should. But moving on to more games that have seen improvements in the visual department with the current core, Dr. Mario now seems to be 100% visually complete and playing 100% compared to real hardware. And the audio on this one, last time I showed it to you, had a little bit of scratchiness, and now it seems to be totally good. So go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds, and I'll come back with more games to show. sounds exactly like I remember Dr. Mario sounding like, and I will say that I'm not that great at this game, which is interesting because I've regularly played Tetris the Grandmaster on my Taito Type X2, and I've gotten relatively decent at it. Definitely not going to be winning any awards or contests as far as the performance that is concerned, but Dr. Mario is just a very tough game. We were talking about it on Discord, and RGW Panda said the same thing, and I've been meaning to mention their Twitch channel because what happens is when a new core comes out, I do a video, but Panda goes on Twitch and live streams tests on the current course. I will leave a link to their Twitch down below. It's definitely worth checking out, especially if you're into pandas, because one does show up on camera. But honestly, Dr. Mario here, if there's any problem with it whatsoever, I would never be able to find it. That might be because there is no problem to be found. That might be because I just am not very familiar with the game. And I love that there's a character like Lump here. Just this giant bullfrog toad doesn't make any sense, but it's fun to see. But if you're a huge Dr. Mario fan and you see anything that doesn't look right to your eye, tell me down below. Or if you're a huge Dr. Mario fan and you think this is 100%, leave me that note as well, because I depend on your guys' eyes. I've only got 2, you've got about 10,000. Now moving back into the Tony Hawk universe, we're going to go through Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, which is my personal favorite in the franchise. And again, we have all of the text on the skate wheel here. When we get into the character select screen, we have all of the different text, all of the stats that we would need. And when we actually get into the game, it is running extremely well. It's fast, it's fluid, all the graphics are here, everything looks good. And if we move over to a previous capture, looking at what this used to look like, you're going to see a night and day difference. Quite literally, because the lighting is completely different between one or the other. But look at the text there for your score and the tricks that you are throwing. There is nothing. It's random garbled characters. This is what a lot of the core fixed today, but there's also a lot of improvements just in the overall playability, the lighting scheme, and everything else in previous core revisions before we checked out this new core. It's just awesome. You can play, everything feels good. Again, if there's any issues with this, I would never be able to tell. And that's what we're really finding with a lot of these cores lately. If a game is running well, there might not actually be anything wrong with it whatsoever. We're kind of pixel peeping now and looking for the little tiny glitches that aren't there on original hardware. And that is a good sign as to how the core is shaping up. We're no longer looking for a lot of crashes and things like that. We're looking for tiny blips that shouldn't be there. Because at this point in time with the current core, we have over an 85% playable rate as far as games are concerned. And this weekend I'm going to have a video on what games can be beaten 100%. Some of the best games on the Nintendo 64 you could just sit down and play from start to finish. But it is so fun to see the game go from this to this in real time. The innovation on this core, the improvements just keep coming fast and furiously, and I can't wait to see what the next core brings us, because something like this, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, pretty much everyone who's into retro gaming has played this at least once in their life, and I'm assuming a lot of you have played a lot more than that. Used to play this back in the day, visiting friends in college. We'd just sit there, have a couple drinks, and the more I drank, the better I got at the game, and I'm pretty sure that's still true because I wasn't very good in that capture. Now moving on to another game that's seen some improvements is the Powerpuff Girls game. Now I'm not going to lie to you, this game is not good, it's pretty janky, but it used to be that the actual playable characters were invisible. You could get into the game, but none of the actual combatants would appear, so you're basically playing as an invisible character, which is kind of funny, but not really worth showing on camera. Now on the current core, all of the characters are here, and it is a big improvement, because obviously you can't play this game blind. Now am I saying you should play the Powerpuff Girls? If you have some attachment to the series, it's one of your favorite things, definitely check it out. If you're playing with a friend, it's definitely a lot better, but if you're just going to play against the CPU, this game can be absolutely frustrating, and you can definitely cheese it as well. If you pin any of your opponents into a corner, they basically cannot escape, and you're going to get a free victory, but they can do the exact same thing to you as well. But the game does have some charming music, of course, because it's based on a Cartoon Network cartoon, so go ahead and listen for like 30 seconds or so this time, but don't go anywhere because I've still got more Tony Hawk and other games to show you. But if you like this game, leave a comment down below because I would be curious to know who does. I mean, it sounds good, it looks good, it's just not the best game on the Nintendo 64, but let's be real, there weren't that many epic fighting games on this platform. If you want good fighting games, 2D or 3D, PlayStation 1 or Sega Saturn are definitely going to be where the bulk of the library is, but it is still fun from an innovation standpoint to talk about the fact that this game now has characters that you can see with your own two eyes. If you go back to previous cores, you can play without them. Now moving on to the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater, the game that got everything moving. Again, we have way more text and everything just seems to be working like you would expect it to. And it kind of makes me feel old to think how old this game really is right now, and I wish I could give you a sound sample, but this is the type of soundtrack that 100% is not going to be something I can give you. Just be aware that it does cut down compared to the PlayStation 1 version, how much music you get, but most of the soundtrack is still there. And forgive me for my performance in the original Tony Hawk Pro Skater, they changed the controls between 1, 2, and 3. I played 3 to 2 to 1 and it totally broke my brain. But again, this is another one that you can just pick up and start playing on the current core. And this was a series of games, 1, 2, and 3, that seemed to take a while to actually start working correctly. But there must have been something in the code that brought all 3 of them better to life, because FPGAZumSpass notated this series in his notes and he released the core this morning. Now moving over to Top Gear Rally, this is another one that's seen improvements in text and visuals on the current core. And the best part is if you are on the MiSTer FPGA Discord on the Nintendo 64 channel, every time a new core comes out, we start rapidly testing and we get to find out within like 15-20 minutes all of the improvements that nobody knows exist, because Robert will note the improvements, but even sometimes he is surprised what other games see enhancements based on that core, because it's not like he tests every single game before he releases a core, so you look for improvements, regressions, and any other notes that would be useful. So if you're not on MiSTer Discord yet, I can't recommend you pop over there enough. Just be aware if you join, because I told you to. Be nice, everyone likes that. And I will say that Top Gear Rally, definitely not my favorite game in the world, and playing it after playing Beetle Adventure Racing breaks my brain because it has a completely different physics and handling system, but it is still a fun game that's definitely one of those games everyone remembers on the Nintendo 64, so to have it here today looking this good is awesome. But tell me down below if you're a big fan of this game now, if you played it back in the day, because this is just not one I had when I was a kid with a Nintendo 64, so I'm only looking at this from a more modern perspective. If I'm going to pick up a recent game to play on the N64, this might not be on that top 10 list for me personally, but I know a lot of people love it, and I know it's gotten a lot of improvements, and that's all that really matters here. Games are looking better, and that's where we're kind of at with the core improvements in and of themselves. A lot of games already work, some have some visual glitches, so now when we get a new core, people go through the different games that they're familiar with to see if any of those glitches have been improved. Like Beetle Adventure Racing, I played that so many times on cores, I just know what it looks like and when things have been fixed. Now moving over to Clay Fighter 63 1/3, this is a viewer request. I've been promising one person that I would look at this game again for like a month now, and it's not that I forget, it's just that I have so many games to test, I kind of get sidetracked. I read a comment from them this morning asking when I was going to test it, so you're seeing Clay Fighter 63 1/3 here on the current core because I remembered to do it this time. This is a weird series. It seems like people either absolutely love it or don't have any interest in it whatsoever, but I did show this very early in the testing series because it was one of the first games that you could actually get into and get some gameplay going. Since then, if there's anything on the screen that doesn't seem like it should be here, that seems like a glitch, I would never notice it whatsoever. This just seems to be Clay Fighter. I'm not a huge fan of the series. I always love what they try to do, using 3D and 2D together and using stop motion animation to create character sprites. From an artistry standpoint, I totally get that whole Clay thing. From a gameplay standpoint though, it feels a little bit stilted and not as responsive as I would love. But hey, we all have our favorites and lesser favorites, and this is definitely low on my list, but maybe high on yours. I will say it's got a fun soundtrack though, and it sounds great on the core. Listen, and I'll be right back.
You lazy clay things! Fight! Fly down to the skies! With Yamin! Clock you! Get away! Whoa, man! Ouch! No!
I mean, it sounds pretty good in my ear, and the fun thing about this game is I did an episode on it maybe 3 months ago when I talked about the lost 3DO M2 version of Clay Fighter, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description below as well, because this game basically pivoted from the 3DO M2 over to the Nintendo 64, so this is technically, at least in lineage design, part of the 3DO M2 library that I love talking so much about. Other than that, Clay Fighter 63 1/3 seems to work perfect on the current core. But my main takeaway, even though I'm a huge fan of Tony Hawk Pro Skater, here is that Beetle Adventure Racing now has so many improvements. I played this game so much back in the day, and I plan on playing it a lot more now that it is working better on the current core. It's been in my collection for years, and if you've never played it, definitely check it out. It's that great Nintendo 64 arcade racing that everyone loved back in the day, and an FPGA with this clean HDMI out, it just looks incredible, and that's where the core is at right now. If I wanted to play Beetle Adventure Racing today, I would pick up my MiSTer, not my real hardware, at least for this one game. But that's the current slate of tests for the current core. I'm sure Robert's going to update this, and I'll probably be back in 2 days or so to be able to give you a new video. But if I take a minute to comment, I'm a little bit busy this week, so just be patient with me. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what game you want to see tested or retested next. I'm trying to hit some of the games we haven't shown yet on the channel, so if there's anything you've never seen that you want to see, just tell me about it down below. And if you have any good Halloween costumes you're going for this weekend, I'd love to hear that too. Short of that, go play some Nintendo 64, and I'll see you guys next time for the new core. Bye bye!